Father Roy called me this week, and he asked me a question. He said, how many Catholics, Stef, do you really think believe what the church teaches? How many of them do you really think that marriage is an institution for one man and one woman until death do they part? How many of them do you think really believe that abortion is always wrong? Or how many really believe that artificial contraception is immoral in use? Or et cetera, et cetera. And he asked me all the things that people argue about, And we talked about it for a minute, but then I said, Roy, here's a real question, more important than those, really, and more fundamental. How many Catholics really believe what they're going to hear on Sunday in the gospel? That Jesus was going to send the Holy Spirit. It's a spirit of truth, and it will guide the church into all truth. Here's the thing. When over 20 years of talking with people about what the church believes, I can tell you a few things. First of all, most of the time, when people bring up something about church doctrine and complains about it or something, they're really not saying they don't believe it. What they're really saying is, I don't like this teaching. Or I don't want to follow this teaching. That's one group. Another group is really saying that the church is wrong. And in that group, when they tell me why what the church teaches is wrong, they use what I'll call worldly criteria. So for instance, people will say, the church should ordain women. And they talk about it in terms of fairness, or privilege, or power. Those are the categories they use. Those categories have nothing at all to do with why the church teaches what she teaches. And so people are trying to understand church teaching. I call it from the outside. In one of George Weigel's biographies of John Paul II, he writes that John Paul said to him one time, people try to understand me from the outside, but they cannot. They can only understand me from the inside. And if you're trying to understand why the church says she cannot ordain women from categories of like, well, this isn't fair that one group gets it and the other group doesn't, you'll never understand it. And I've come to another realization. It took me a while. I can be a little thick at times. But now, finally, when people bring up something like that, I say, well, let me ask you this question first. Do you really want to know why the church teaches what she teaches? Do you really want to come to understand that? Because, quite frankly, most people don't, especially non-Catholics, but even Catholics. They just want to tell me what they believe and why they're right. And I mean this with no animus whatsoever. I've just realized I'm wasting my time and theirs. Think about any time you've had a discussion with someone and they didn't want to really move off of their position. They just wanted to say what they say. It's a waste of time to try to talk to them, right? And maybe we've been one of those people at times, you know what I'm saying? So I mean that with no judgment or no meanness. But let's just state the facts. If you just want women to be ordained, that's all you want, then there's no point in my talking to you about it, right? Here's the thing. And I'm talking about this from the inside, I might say. There was a time when I struggled with some of the church's teachings. Now, I'm not talking about just at any one time, any priest or bishop we know can teach things that aren't what the church teaches. And I'm not talking about small things. If anyone says the church teaches that the earth has 4 moons, feel completely, you're allowed to disregard that entirely, right? I'm talking about what the church teaches as doctrine, right? And even as late as when I was in the seminary, there were still teachings that I struggled with. And finally it occurred to me, I said, Stef, you cannot be ordained until you resolve these things. You can't be an official representative of a church when you don't completely believe what she's teaching. And so at that point, I did one of the few smart things I've ever done in my life. I prayed to the Holy Spirit. Here's the thing, we hear, will lead you into all truth. We hear that as the church, right? And that's true. But I think it also applies to individuals. The Spirit will lead us individually into truth if we ask for it, right? And the hard part about truth is that it stands outside of us, independent of us. You can't manipulate the truth. The truth is the truth. And we have to receive it. But the trouble is, receiving the truth means that we have to change, right? We have to conform ourselves to the truth. I can insist all day that today is Monday. It's not Monday. It never will be Monday until tomorrow, right? So here's the process that the Holy Spirit led me through. First, do I believe in Jesus? That Jesus is God, and that he came down from the Father, and he started the church, etc. I do. I believe that. Do you believe that he sent the Holy Spirit? And then he said, he promised, that the Spirit will lead the church into truth. I believe that. I do believe that. He said it, and I believe it. So, if the Spirit is going to lead the church into truth, then would the Spirit allow the church to teach what is not true? Well, no, he wouldn't. Logically, I can't come up with any other thing, but no, he would not let the church teach what is not true. So, and this was the kicker, really, in a way, so then everything the church teaches must be true. Like official teaching, again, I just want to make sure I'm clear about that. Well, I had to chew on that for a day or two, not because I didn't think it made sense. I just didn't want it to be true, right? It's like, but finally, yeah, I guess you're right. And so what the church teaches is true whether or not you, Stef, understand it, want it, like it, whatever. Yeah, at that point. So the only thing to do next is, okay, then this truth that the church teaches that I don't like, why does the church teach it? And so I had to research that, whatever, the catechism, my professors, wherever I had to discover that. And when I did that work, I realized this is true. This is true. And it brought me to a whole nother place. Right? This is the work, really, that we have to do. If there's a teaching of the church with which you struggle, first of all, fine. We all start somewhere, right? And I'm not naive enough to think, especially because I know myself in my own life, I'm not naive enough to think everybody, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I like everything the church teaches all the time. From the time I was 3, I've always loved church teaching. It just doesn't, we're not like that. So if there's a church teaching with which you struggle, I would suggest these things. First of all, be honest with yourself. Is it because I don't believe it or because I don't want it to be true? And very often we just don't want it to be true. Let's face it. Living the church's teachings can be difficult. It's not easy to live a marriage and not use artificial contraception. It's not easy to date someone and get closer and closer, deeper in love with them, and more intimate mentally and emotionally and whatever, without wanting to express that physically as well. That's not easy. It's not easy to see your friends or family members or even yourself to live it if you have same-sex attraction. It's not easy not to express that in some way. But you know what? It's also not easy to be honest all the time. It's not easy to be patient with people. It's not easy all the time to get to Mass every week. Nothing about the moral life is at first easy. Or not everything about the moral life is at first easy. It's also not easy to play the guitar or play the piano or violin or to throw a pass 40 yards right to the point you want it to get, you know, or to hit a fastball. We work at it, right? Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. See, the world wants to say, and it feels like, freedom means doing what I want, when I want, wherever I want, however I want, with whom I want, right? But anybody who's of any maturity at all has got to realize that's not freedom. How did I come to freedom to be able to play what I wanted on the guitar? It was by years, really, of the drudgery of scales and arpeggios and etudes and whatever else. But one day I said, wow, I can play this because I had done the discipline of learning, right? Next thing, if you struggle with a teaching of the church, find out why the church teaches what it teaches. Almost no one who complains to me about a church teaching or who disagrees with the church can tell me why the church teaches them. So don't stay in ignorance of that. If you have a teaching you don't like, find out why the church teaches what it teaches. And it's always, and this surprises people, because people think of church teaching as don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. There is a beauty behind the church teaching that's not a negative, it's a positive, right? Because the truth will make us free, right? The moral life is a free life. Molding ourselves to the truth brings us freedom and brings us into life of reality, you know. And it's a good life. And there are, especially today, you can find out why the church teaches so easily. The catechism online has a million things. I'm always happy to talk to someone about that, right? But don't live in error. And stop short, here's my last thing. Stop short of saying the church is wrong about this. And this is why. The final thing for me was the Holy Spirit asked me, he said, Stef, are you smarter than St. Augustine? Are you really smarter than St. Thomas Aquinas? Or John Paul II? Or Benedict XVI? Are you smarter than 2,000 years of theologians thinking about these things? No, I had to say, I'm not. And no offense, neither are you, right? That's fine. God gives it to the Holy Spirit, gives it to the church, gives it to us, you know. Doesn't mean we can't figure some things out for ourselves, doesn't mean we're not smart, but I'm not smarter than the church. As soon as you say the church is wrong about this, that's arrogance, really, and that's the enemy leading you. Live a life in union with the church. Her teachings come from the Holy Spirit, and they lead us to freedom, they lead us to life.